Good day, everyone. What I want to share to you today is content development for flexible learning modules. The learning process has been influenced by the expansion and evolution of computer network and multimedia technologies. Those technologies allows the learners to participate in an active and self-paced learning environment. Technologies were not necessarily changing the way of teaching subjects or courses. What has changed, in fact, is the discipline of teaching resources of the teachers and learners' behavior. They have added interest to the course content and delivery. As the content, school is moving toward developing a highly interactive multimedia learning content. Most web-based contents have been developed using text, image, sound, and video, but fail to include interactivity contents. Therefore, the ability to construct effective, useful, usable, and satisfying electronic contents remain one of the major obstacles in e-learning because the educational design is complex and the main aim of developing e-content is to achieve specific goals in education and place the learner needs at the center of the learning process. This will be the learning objectives of my discussion. At the end of this video, the audience will be able to learn how to formulate learning objectives that they can use in preparation of their modules. The idea behind producing meaningful and measurable learning objective is simple. We facilitate the creation of training content that is in line with those objectives, and they provide clarity of learners in terms of expectation around the training. As what we have here, the ADDIE model. It is the generic process traditionally used by instructional designers and training developers or the subject matter expert. The five phases are analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation. Represent a dynamic, flexible guideline for building effective training and performance support tools. The analysis and design stages are essential to ensure course effectiveness and learners' motivation and participation. Analyzing learners' need and learning content and finding the appropriate mix of learning activities and technical solutions is crucial to creating an effective and engaging course. Course effectiveness and participants' motivation depend on several elements, as what we have here, including the relevance of the content and course objectives for the participants. So, do they meet existing needs? Type of learning activities offered by the course? Are they interesting, inspiring, and well matched to the level of participants? Course duration, timing, and number of hours to be invested. Do they fit with the participants' availability? The technical aspects. Is the technical solutions appropriate to learners? Are the technical elements or the learning platforms and its functions clear and understandable to participants? Needs analysis. This document does not focus on conducting needs analysis. However, this kind of analysis is crucial to validate the need for an e-learning intervention and to provide important information regarding which gaps need to be addressed to ensure that the intervention is targeted to organizational needs. Before designing an e-learning course, a need analysis should be conducted to determine whether the training is required to fill a gap in professional knowledge and skills, and an e-learning is the best solution to deliver the training. In fact, the, there are there might be several causes of a capacity problem, and an organization's capacity to achieve its goal can be affected by many factors, including, of course, factor in enabling environment, policy and legislative frameworks, rules and norms internal to an organization, and political will. Organizational aspect, the organization's formal and informal incentive and support structures, staff, equipment, and finances. And of course, individual capacity, the skills, knowledge, and attitudes of individuals working in the organization. Now, let's assume that a learning goal has been defined and e-learning has been indicated as an appropriate uh, solution to achieve that goal. So for example, the course goal could be improving, for example, a school delivery, no, of school delivery of information, or even delivery of their institutional outcomes, and promoting its use in decision making. At this point, analyzing the target audience is required to identify a variety of factors that will influence the uh, factors to be considered, of course, is a region or geographic area in which learners reside. So why is it important? This is needed to define language and cultural issues, add to inform choices between synchronous and asynchronous tools. Learners located in different time zones will have difficulty communicating in real time. Now, another one is kind of organization or institution in which learners work their professional rules within them. This will help to identify specific learning objectives for each target audience group. Another is learners' previous knowledge and expertise on the subject. No, in general, of course, uh, learners with a lot of prior knowledge do not need the same kind of or level of training support as novices. The amount of time available for e-learning and the learning context. No? This information influences the amount of content to be provided and the need of chunking the content into small units, of course. Another is the location of the learner, no? Which participate in e-learning and from they where can access the internet, can they study at home, at work, or in e-learning centers. This determines connection time is required for the course and whether learners can download plugins from the internet. Another consideration is the network bandwidth. Bandwidth limitations may slow application performance and decrease user productivity. In certain situations, low bandwidth application may be preferred since they take less time to transmit. And the last one is the computer and software capabilities such as screen size, number of colors they can display, sound playback, the RAM, of course, the amount of memory, and processor type and speed. Technical requirements, including multimedia capabilities, influence the selection of the media mix and, of course, the plug-in. A course goal, such as assessing the attainment of program outcomes and promoting its use in decision making, provides an initial definition of the content and a focus for the course design. Now, it is very important to instructional designer, no, to identify the detailed course content in order to achieve that goal. Because content analysis is probably the most critical step in the instructional design process. If the designer does not include accurate and relevant content, then there is little value in finding the best instructional methods and media to transfer the information to learners. The analysis must consider the learner's relate factor, previous knowledge and skills, as I mentioned earlier, which emerged from the target audience analysis. Content analysis are prerequisite for developing specific learning objectives and the curriculum outline. Of course, subject matter experts and instructional designers work together to perform the analysis. This process helps the instructional design to familiarize with the content. Moreover, it forces the subject matter expert to work through each individual content element and indicate the most important and challenging aspects that should be considered. During this process, both of instructional design and subject matter expert have the opportunity to view the content from the learner's perspective. Now, content identification and analysis can be done by applying the following methods. Task analysis. It identifies the job task that learners should learn or improve and the knowledge and skills that need to be developed or reinforced. Another is the topic analysis. It is carried out to identify and classify the course content. Depending on the circumstances, one of these methods may be preferred. No, task analysis is used mainly in course design to build specific job-related or interpersonal skills, or sometimes we call perform courses. While topic analysis is appropriate for courses that are primarily designed to provide information or achieve broader educational objectives, or what we call informed courses. task analysis. Task analysis is defined differently in different contexts, of course. In the context of instructional design, a task analysis is a detailed analysis of action and decisions that a person takes to perform a job task. Will define unit of work, which includes identifying the knowledge and skills needed to support those actions and decisions. It helps to define content for job-oriented learning courses that aims to develop or reinforce job-related skills. A task analysis is a way to examine carefully exactly how a person performs a certain activity, usually a life skill. It breaks down the activity into a series of tasks which are observable actions or behaviors. Identifying course content through task analysis allow designer, of course, to create a learning course that is job-centered, focus attention on skills, and create case-based scenarios that build on realistic job context. As a result, learners can better integrate the new knowledge into their daily practice. Then, task analysis enables a teacher or a professor or parent to break these activities down into smaller, more manageable pieces. The four main steps in writing a task analysis are knowing your audience, breaking it down further, and considering variables. The task analysis consists of four main steps. Identifying tasks. Identify and describe the tasks that learners should learn or improve to achieve the goal. Classifying tasks. Classify tasks as either procedural or principle-based. When it comes to procedural, of course, tasks that are performed by executing an ordered sequence of steps, such as create a table in Microsoft Word. Okay. For principle-based, tasks requiring judgment and decision to be applied in different situations and under conditions that change every time, such as organizing a conference or a webinar. Breaking up the task. Break each task into steps, okay, for procedural tasks. Guidelines that should be applied to perform the task, so that the principle-based task. For example, for complex tasks requiring the application of strategic or interpersonal skills, such as adapting or solving conflict, different points of view may be needed to identify the guidelines. This can be collected through interviews with several experts. So, example, by asking them about the approach they adopt in challenging situations and looking for commonalities among the various approaches to identify the skills that can help in those situations. And the last one is the identifying required knowledge and skills. Identify the knowledge and skills needed to best perform those steps or apply those guidelines. Analysis aims to identify course content of high content elements. Okay? In identifying the course content, so for example, uh, in the course entitled, for example, computer programming one. Okay? So therefore, the instructional designer first can ask the subject matter expert to identify the main content categories for the course, such as, for example, what will be the required the introduction, how you'll be able to use the uh, platform, for example, using Dev C++, no? And so on. Then the instructional designer can ask the subject matter to further detail each category, okay, and so on. So, for example, the subject matter expert discuss everything, even the variable declaration, the data types, and so on and so forth. Now, of course, visual instruments such as mind maps, concept maps, and process diagrams can help the instructional designers and the subject matter expert clarify connections among content elements. Mind maps can be used to visualize and organize ideas. They can represent words, ideas, tasks, or other items linked to and arranged around a central keyword or idea. Concept maps and causal maps are diagrams used to illustrate connections among concepts in cause-effects relationship, while process diagrams are commonly used to indicate the general flow processes. Classifying, of course, the content elements helps to further recognize connections among them, thus contributing to the refinement of the draft course outline. Content elements can be classified according to the types of content they presented. So what we have here, the following example identifies six main types of content. So as what we have here, we have is, of course, number one, is the facts. Okay? So why do we need to consider the facts uh, in this situation? Okay. Unique, specific information that answer the question who, where, when. Facts are shown exhibit or indicated. For example, data, list, historical events. For procedures, a procedure is a series of clearly defined steps aiming to perform a task. Procedures answer the questions how to. Example, instruction for creating a table in Microsoft Word. So for concepts, a concept is a group of objects, entities, or ideas that are defined by a single word or term, share common characteristics, differ in important characteristics, require a definition, and answer the questions what is. Example, the concept of creating a program. So principles. A principle describe a relationship between two concepts. For example, as price increases, the supply increases. Some principles can be translated into strategic guidelines which can guide decision in complex tasks. Example, guidelines for pacing price volatility. Okay. Interpersonal skills, verbal and nonverbal skills for interacting with other people. Example, content related to negotiating or solving group conflict. And attitudes, predisposition to behavior. Example, content related to appreciate the importance and urgency of adopting measures for limiting the negative impacts of climate change. Okay? By looking at the task and content elements identified in the task and topic analysis, it is possible to translate the overall course goal into more specific learning objectives because learning objectives define the expected outcome of each learning unit. So for example, will learners be able to memorize the steps of the procedure or will they be able to perform it? This is the design phase, no? Specifically for learning objectives. The design phase deals with learning objectives, assessment instrument, exercises, content, subject matter analysis, lesson planning, and media selection. The design phase should be systematic and specific. Systematic means a logical, orderly method of identifying, developing, and evaluating a set of planned strategies targeted for attaining the project goals. Specific means each element of the instructional design plan needs to be executed with attention to details. These are steps used for the design phase, so documentation of the project instructional, visual and technical design strategy, apply instructional strategies according to the intended behavioral outcomes by domain, either cognitive, affective, psychomotor, create storyboards, design the user interface and user experience, prototype creation, apply visual design or graphic design. A learning objective, of course, it is the statement describing competency or performance capability to acquire by the learner. Objectives should be specified for the course as well as for each single activity. We can develop the following learning objectives, of course, construct a logical and persuasive message, explain the concept of relevance, explain the concept of feasibility, describe the elements of a message, current situation, problem, question, response needed, distinguish consistent from inconsistent data, and explain the concept of this one, of course, these are the components we will work on our course. We will focus on writing the uh, excuse, learning objectives per module of a course. You will be introduced to models of writing learning objectives and will be formulating learning objectives in your course. Planning a course is not always linear but typically involves a series of steps. A course plan demonstrates our values and beliefs about higher education in general and what we believe about our roles as teachers specifically. The following steps describe alternative planning decisions you can make in regard to your own course. As mentioned by Ryan and Martin, here are the steps in planning course. Define your view of purpose of education. If, if it is to make the world a better place, you'll want to use contemporary social issues to help students learn the rules in accomplishing this goal. If it is to teach students to think effectively, you'll need to plan student interaction, employing the intellectual skills of observing, classifying, applying, analyzing, and evaluating. If it is demand systematical instructional processes, you'll need to specify course, goal, and objectives clearly with the processes designed to achieve them. If it is to provide students with the ability to earn a living as productive citizens, you'll need to include vocational knowledge and skills. If it is engage students in personally enriching experiences, then you need to select individualized content so students will discover themselves as unique individual and develop personal autonomy. If it should emphasize the great ideas, products, and discoveries of a human mind, you must select contents from the discipline to illuminate major ideas and concepts of important thinkers. But if it should help students clarify their beliefs and values to provide guidance in their lives, you must plan exercises which consider the merits of alternative values. Set, set course goal. The goals for the course should reflect some of those identified for the department or from the program. Usually, your course can be located on a curricular map. For example, it might be described, for example, uh, as a general education course for students with limited background in the discipline, or a general education course for prospective majors and others, or a general education course for all university college students, or an introduction course for prospective majors, an introductory course in technical career program, an advanced course for majors, or a graduate course or a graduate program. Ask the question, how should students be different when they finish this course? Is there consensus in your discipline on what should be included in such a course? Number three, select course content. Careful selection of content will reflect the most important topics. Questions to ask include, does your topic illustrate a method of inquiry, indicate guiding principles in your field, teach a valuable skills among course goals? These steps requires a balance so that there is sufficient content to make the course challenging and not so much more content that the pace of the course is too rushed. Leave room in case a topic takes longer or other unpredictable events occur. Use student feedback devices to adjust coverage rate. Arrange course content. Organization of the content is extremely important in enhancing student learning. Content can be arranged in several ways. Structurally based content is consistent with the way relationship in the field occur, spatial, chronological, or physical, and others. Conceptually based content uses major ideas or concepts to show important relationships, such as relationship of classes and groups of objects or phenomena, relationship of theory to application of theory, or rule to example, or evidence to conclusion, relationship to or logical sequence in which one idea is necessary to comprehend the next, relationships that proceed from simplest idea to those or more complex uh, in obstacles. Okay? Learning-based content is organized by principles such as students should first learn skills that are likely to be useful later in life. Students should encounter familiar ideas in simplex phenomena before those that are more unfamiliar and complex. Students should understand an idea or concept before attempting to interpret and use it. Or a student should encounter material geared to their readiness to learn. Vocationally based content helps students become familiar with practice and employers' needs. Okay? Knowledge utilization content, of course, is arranged so problem-solving situation encourage students to take responsibility for developing logical, organized solution. Knowledge creation-based content is organized around processes of generating, discovering, or verifying knowledge in the field. It shows how scholars discover relationship and draw valid inferences. Value-based content is organized in around issues, dilemmas, ethical problems, or values dimension that help students clarify and become committed to values and beliefs. Consider student goals and characteristics. Why are students taking your course? Some reasons may be to develop a philosophy of life, learn to interpret numerical data, understand scientific principles, uh, concept, become an informed voter, learn to communicate effectively, pass a certification of license or licensing exam, learn to solve complex problems, or learn to organize ideas, and to understand how researchers gain knowledge. They also may be there to get to better job or meet social expectations. The match between your goal and those of your students is important. Try asking students what their goals are, share your goals, and explain important. And of course, what background have your students had and what external pressures are they working? The answers help guide you. Peace. Another is choose instructional modes. Use both active and passive modes of instruction. Lecture is the most common passive mode, while active modes include discussion, case studies, lab clinics, and field experiences. Research about teaching and learning shows that students learn more content more quickly and retain what they have learned longer if they are actively engaged. A combination of the two modes often works well. Select readings and activities. Textbook can be used as an organizing source which integrates the course content. Tell the students how you expect them to use the text in their learning and what is useful about it. Do not criticize it or the author. This isn't constructive. It can undermine learning. If discrepancies occur between your views and the text, explain that rival interpretations exist and give reasons for your choice. You can encourage realization that clear truths are not always agreed upon. Do clarify for students which ideas are acceptable for examination. If textbooks are not used, you'll need to help students organize and integrate knowledge in the course. Monographs and articles can provide depth of information, demonstrate research processes, provide a variety of perspective, and provide up-to-date ideas. A combination might be useful, of course. Number 8, of course, is construct a syllabus. The syllabus formally communicates your expectation, grading procedures, and assignments. The following elements are often included. Of course, your name and contact information, course number, section, entitled, and meeting schedule. Prerequisite of the course or co-requisite. Description of the course along with course outcomes and intended learning outcomes. Required materials, text and supplies. Space for the names and telephone numbers of the at least two classmates. Class schedule with topic and reading sequence, due dates for assignments, and dates and times of exam. Grading standards and criteria, including late work policy, policies regarding attendance, participation, and academic integrity. Number 9, plan to get student feedback. The following indicators can help collect information for revision, exams or quizzes, observe student faces and body language, monitor participation and attendance, monitor frequency of out of class discussion or use of office hours, monitor assignment completion, analyze student papers and journals, examine course evaluation, and ask students directly. The best time to make your own notes about needed changes is after each class session. Number 10 is seek advice from colleagues and experts. Okay, we are not all perfect. Colleagues from the field can provide useful ideas for planning your course on topics such as instructional modes, test construction, and student feedback. Your discipline may have teaching journals which have useful ideas. Of course, introduction, as what we have here, you will find that in this course, all modules have the same components. This introduction, a course planning refers to planning courses of instruction. It serves as a guide for the teachers as well as for the students in creating conductive atmosphere for worthwhile learning and for purposeful activities. The Gagne's principles, no? Because Gagne suggests that learning tasks of intellectual skills can be organized in a hierarchy according to complexity. Stimulus recognition, response generation, procedure following, use of terminology, discrimination, concept formation, role application, and problem solving. The primary significance of the hierarchy is to identify prerequisites that should be completed to facilitate learning at each level. Prerequisites are identified by doing a task analysis of a learning or training task. Learning hierarchies provide a basis for the sequencing of instruction. Learning objectives are written with learners in mind, what learners will be able to do, while course goals are written from the perspective of program developers, what the course hope to achieve. Some principles in formulating learning objectives, of course, is stated using verbs that describe the learner's expected behavior or action. Bloom's taxonomy of cognitive learning objectives includes the following hierarchical levels. We have knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. Of course, the Bloom's taxonomy guide us on choosing action verbs for each cognitive level. Ideally, the learning objectives for each module should be stated with reference to the higher order thinking skills. The learning objectives combine two elements. Of course, we have the expected level of performance, either through an action verb such as describe or explain, and the learning content. the type of knowledge or skills that must be learned, such as the main objectives of developing a software. No? According to the revised Bloom's taxonomy of the cognitive domain, learning objectives can imply 6 different types of cognitive performance, ranging from the lowest performance level, you remember, then to the highest, the create. The four parts, our learning objective should be stated as clearly as precisely as possible. ABCD of learning objectives will help you to formulate well-stated learning objectives. We have audience, behavior, condition, degree. The objective does not have to be written in this order, ABCD, but it should contain all of these elements. The audience, who will do the behavior? Of course, the behavior, what should the learner be able to do? The condition, under what condition do you want the learner to be able to do it? Okay? And the degree is how we will must it be done. Okay? Objective will include for distinct components, the audience, behavior, condition, and degree. Objective must be both observable and measurable to be effective. Use of words like understand and learn in writing objectives are generally not acceptable as they are difficult to measure. Right, written objectives are a vital part of instructional design because they provide the roadmap for designing and delivering curriculum. Throughout the design and development of curriculum, a comparison of the content to be delivered should be made to the objectives identified for the program. This process, called performance agreement, ensures that the final product meets the overall goals of instruction identified in the first level objective. Who is doing the learning? Describe the intended learner or end users of the instruction. Often, the audience is identified only by the first level of objective because of redundancy. For example, the paramedic refresher participants, the ITE students, the nursing care provider attending the seminar. No? What is the work to be accomplished by the learner? So we need to distinguish, no? Should be both observable and measurable behaviors, should refer to action verbs and describe behaviors. Because behavior, we need to describe learner's capability, must be observable and measurable. You will define the measurement elsewhere in the goal. If it is a skill, it should be our real-world skills. The behavior can include demonstration of knowledge or skills in any of its the domain of learning, either cognitive, psychomotor, affective, or interpersonal. So example, should be able to write a report, should be able to describe the steps, should be able to develop a program. For cognitive domain, emphasizes remembering or reproducing something which has presumably been learned. Deal with what a learner should know, understand, comprehend, solve, spell, and critique in others. For psychomotor domain, emphasize some muscular motor skills, some manipulation of material in objects, or some act that requires a neuromuscular coordination. Concerned with how a learner moves or controls his or her body. For affective domain, composed of 2 different types of behavior, either reflexive or attitude, and voluntary reaction and actions, the values. Stages, perception, decisions, action, and evaluation. In interpersonal domain, emphasize learner skills, not attitude or knowledge, associated with interpersonal exchanges. How a learner interacts with others in a variety of situations. Under what circumstances will this behavior takes place? Of course, what are the conditions, constraints in which the learners will be expected to perform this task? For example, at the end of the session, condition equipment or tools that may or may not be utilized in completion of the behavior. Environmental condition may be also be included. Example, given an oxygen range regulator and tank with oxygen, or given the complete works of will given the following environment, snowing, temperature, degrees, and others. How will the behavior need to be performed between primary and secondary sources? It states the standard for acceptable performance, time, accuracy, proportion, or quality. So example, without error, 9 out of 10, within 60 seconds, 100% of my students, something. The ITE students will learn how to create a running program. So ITE students, the audience, the behavior, what does learn how to create a running program in mean? Condition, what circumstances are involved, degree, what level of proficiency is needed. Maybe it's better the end of the month, IT students will be able to create a running program when following the appropriate instruction, earning a grade of at least 7 out of 10 points. So, audience, IT students, behavior creating a running program, condition by the end of the month when following the appropriate instructions, and degree earning a grade of at least 7 out of 10. Learners will know how to solve the quadratic formula. Learners, of course, the audience, what is specifically meant by know how to use the quadratic formula for behavior. For condition, what circumstances are involved, and for degree, what level of understanding is needed. The term, learners will be able to calculate solution using the quadratic formula or equations when solving quadratic equations. Audience learners, behavior calculate solution using the quadratic equation, condition when solving quadratic equation, degree with 100% accuracy is assumed if not specified. Example, to know how to teach without lecturing. Audience who? Behavior what does, how know to teach mean. Condition what circumstances are involved. Degree what level of proficiency is needed. Very right. At the end of the webinar, attendees will be able to describe 8 alternative methods to lecturing that can increasing learning and transfer when planning lessons. Audience attendees, behavior describe 8 alternative methods to lecturing, conditioned by the end of the workshop when planning session. Degree with 100% accuracy is assumed if not specified. Of course, activities, we need to examine whether and how design activities for conceptual exploration support preliminary engagement and with learning of foundational and open, hard-to-grasp programming concept for students. Method, drawing on principle from dynamic mathematics, we develop a suite of non-programming digital and unplugged activities embedded in a curriculum before a student engage in a Scratch block-based programming. The digital Bloom's taxonomy. So put simply, learning taxonomies help us think about how learning happens. Even if they're not good as we've often seen the framework prescribed, they still highlight that there are many ways to frame thinking and give us practice in realizing that potential. This means that we can have taxonomies for differentiation and taxonomies for thinking and taxonomies for task and assessment. So many possibilities for examining the actual process of thinking, learning, and the application of each. It can lead to tools that help to design lesson, units, and assessment. And it can lead to further splintering of the concept, like these graphics that merge 21st century learning, modern digital and social spaces, and Bloom's taxonomy in one framework. The figure graphic provides 126 power verbs for digital learning, a kind of Bloom's digital taxonomy that relies on the existing remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create, and then provides common digital tasks like moderating, duplicating, blogging, wiki building, podcasting, and more. The result is a tool that can help teachers think about the levels of higher order thinking that go into these kinds of activities and projects. To be clear, just because a verb is in one category doesn't mean it can also be used at higher or lower levels of thinking. Appear in other categories of Bloom's digital taxonomy. In fact, there is significant amount of subjectivity and editorializing that goes into any kind of framework and purports to outline how thinking happens. It's not an exact science. Nonetheless, just the fact that we're exploring thinking in digital tasks and student work together is at least as valuable as any single framework in and of itself. By doing this kind of work, we collectively, or you, administrators, schools, researchers, universities and colleges, and others can develop fluency in the murky and abstract field of applied neurology. We can begin to understand how understanding happens. Other taxonomies have been developed for the affective and psychomotor domains. Verifying the alignment of learning objectives, activities, and tests. Clear learning objectives allow the development of learning activities which are really focused on learners' needs and provide the basis for evaluation tests. It is important to ensure that learning activities and evaluation tests aim to develop and assess the same type of performance and learning content as expressed in learning objectives. In other words, they need to be aligned with the learning objectives. Level for cognitive domain. So we have remember, the learner is able to recognize or memorize information, Understand, the learner is able to reformulate a concept. Apply, the learner is able to use the information in a new way. Analyze, the learner is able to decompose and define relationship among components. Evaluate, the learner is able to justify a decision according to criterion or standard. Or create, the learner is able to realize a new program or software or approach. Sequence. How should the learning objectives be sequenced in structuring a course? One of the methods used to define the course sequence is the prerequisite method. The method uses a learning objectives hierarchy, teaching first those skills that seem to be prerequisite for another all skills. It is possible to create hierarchy among learning objectives by using the result of task and topic analysis. The diagram shows the hierarchy among the objectives that were formulated. The learning objective, construct a logical and persuasive message, is at the higher level than others. In fact, the other learning objectives, explain the concept of relevance and visibility, are all prerequisites to be able to construct a logical and persuasive message. Methods, there are several other, of course, methods that can be used to organize and sequence the content, and different methods can be integrated to design the best structure of your course. Some of these other methods include the following. In a job-oriented course, perform course, the content can be organized to follow the order of the actions in the real job environment. This is the job context principle. In a non-job oriented course or informed course, concept can be organized according to their structural connections, such as by describing the characteristic of class before describing each members. And of course, providing example first, then definitions, or starting with concrete or simple information, and then proceeding to abstract or complex concepts. If learners' profile, general characteristic, job profiles, educational background are well-known concepts that are most familiar to learners can be presented before those that are far from learners' experience. The curriculum can start with a more general overview, then focus on the specific topics, and at the end, go back to the general conclusion. This is the Zoom principle. The curriculum can revisit the basic ideas, repeatedly building upon them until the learner understands them fully. This is the spiral curriculum. Structure the diagram. The example of structure for an e-learning course. A course can include several units which include a number of sessions in a self-paced e-learning course. Each session is a learning objective made by a set of screens including text and media elements. Developing the course using a modular approach allows the definition of a number of personal learning paths that responds to different individual interests and learning needs. The task analysis helps to establish a connection between learners' needs and a specific course element. This enables learners to select a subset of session to learners to help them identify the right subset of relevant course element. Task analysis can be a very time-consuming activity, especially when it's involved multiple interviews and document analysis. However, there are some techniques to reduce the time needed for the analysis. The following case study shows how a task analysis is conducted in a few days and its result used to develop a course outline. This slide show the sample template and sample content of your intended learning objectives or outcomes. So, of course, and thank you. Don't forget to watch, like, and subscribe. Hashtag DocMelo the author.